Somewhere between a factory floor in Chicago and a customs checkpoint in Guangdong, a US-made electric motor suddenly came to a stop. The issue? A tiny missing part, smaller than a breath mint, that brought the entire operation to a halt. That small but essential component is a rare earth magnet which China almost completely controls. And now China has chosen to stop exporting it. Here's where the story takes an unexpected twist. Instead of finding a quick workaround, Ford made a bold move. They shut down the entire production line. And now behind closed doors, American manufacturers are starting to quietly discuss something that was once unthinkable. What if we just moved the whole operation to China? After 5 years of tariffs, economic battles, and heated political talk about decoupling, the result may be the exact opposite of what Washington intended. US companies turning back to Beijing for access and approvals. What was meant to split the two economies apart now feels more like a well-set trap, and China is tightening it. In April alone, China's exports to the US dropped 21%, but even more dramatic is what happened in reverse. US ocean container exports to China fell 77% from March to April, dropping to just 57,300 TEUs, according to Panga shipping data reported by CNBC. This steep decline came right after Trump announced another round of retaliatory tariffs. But this isn't just about fewer containers. It's triggering a massive shakeup in global supply chains. As reported by the Wall Street Journal, major American car companies worried about rare earth shortages are now seriously thinking about moving motor production into China. That would let them sidestep Beijing's export restrictions entirely. The same policy that was supposed to bring manufacturing home is now pushing it further into China's orbit. China's new trade approach is already showing results. Between January and April 2025, Beijing's trade surplus with Europe hit a record $90 billion. According to Shipco News, that number could pass $250 billion by the end of the year if current trends continue. Meanwhile, US trade activity is collapsing. In April alone, total American ocean exports fell a staggering 78%, with US demand shrinking. Chinese exporters are turning to Europe, where business is still strong. They're also benefiting from the yuan's steep fall, its lowest in 13 years against the euro, which makes Chinese goods even cheaper and more appealing. French and German buyers, already dealing with their own supply chain challenges from the tariffs, are now ramping up imports from China. So while US ports fall quiet, Chinese exports are flowing smoothly into Europe. But this battle isn't just about where goods go, it's also about who covers the rising costs. With American consumers unhappy about higher prices, big US retailers are pushing back. According to the South China Morning Post, many are now asking Chinese suppliers to cover up to 2/3 of Trump's new tariffs. The pressure is growing fast, and what began as a trade dispute is turning into a full-blown struggle over economic power and survival. Profit margins are already razor-thin, and Chinese manufacturers are refusing to cave. Instead of backing down, they're adjusting their pricing, rerouting supply chains, and holding firm. To stay competitive, exporters in Beijing have started cutting prices by 5 to 10% while redirecting shipments to Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, regions with lower tariffs and rising demand. There are rumors that China might subsidize US importers directly, but no credible data supports that claim. In fact, the numbers show that if Chinese exporters absorb too much of the cost, they risk collapse. If US retailers pay the difference, they'll raise prices, triggering backlash. And if consumers bear the burden, many could cut spending, hurting demand. No matter how you look at it, someone has to absorb the hit, and the whole system grows more fragile. Here's where it gets even more surprising. This economic standoff is now reshaping decisions about where to build new factories. And despite all the talk, they're not being built in the US. When Trump imposed these tariffs, the goal was to hit China hard and bring back American manufacturing jobs. But the reality is far different. Data from Panga shows that in April, US exports crashed to just 57,300 TEUs, from 265,500 in March. That's a jaw-dropping 78% drop, mostly because of China's retaliatory tariffs, which now target key industrial goods with triple-digit rates. Look at U.S. steel figures, and the picture becomes clearer. 26% of U.S. steel and 44% of its aluminum is imported. Now, with tariffs doubling on these critical materials, the cost of domestic production has soared. That makes American-made goods too expensive to sell abroad, weakening the very competitive edge that reshoring was supposed to create. While politicians still talk about bringing jobs back, the numbers tell another story. Factory orders are vanishing, and production is slowing or stopping altogether. The problems only deepen when we look at industries like electric vehicles and defense. The future of what's left of U.S. manufacturing may now depend on whether these industries can still get the materials they need to keep production going. Beijing is tightening its grip on rare earth magnets. These are key components used in electric vehicles, wind turbines, and advanced military systems. This has really put U.S. automakers in a difficult position. They now face two costly options: either try to find alternative sources, which is both expensive and, honestly, incredibly hard, or stop production altogether. At the moment, China supplies over 90% of the world's rare earth magnets. On top of that, Beijing has added new export licensing rules that are now being intentionally delayed or even outright denied, making it nearly impossible for foreign companies to get these critical materials directly. According to the Wall Street Journal, several major American automakers are now seriously considering moving parts of their operations to China, where it's still legal to assemble these magnets into electric motors under current regulations. The effects of these shortages are already showing. Back in May, Ford had to shut down its Chicago Explorer plant because they couldn't source enough magnets. A supply chain manager told the Journal bluntly, "If you want to export a magnet, they won't let you. But if it's inside a motor, they will." This loophole gives China a strategic advantage, keeping global companies dependent on Chinese manufacturing while technically staying within export laws. Ironically, the tariffs and pressure tactics aimed at cornering China are now pushing more U.S. companies to consider building new factories inside China, just to keep their production lines running. In just 1 month, U.S. exports to China collapsed by 77%. That's not just a dip, it's a near shutdown. For many American companies, moving production to China would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Now, it's becoming the only way to access rare earth materials still allowed under Chinese law, as long as they're part of an assembled product. That's exactly why automakers are looking at shifting motor production to China. What started as a trade war is now forcing U.S. industries to deepen their presence in China just to survive. And China isn't just surviving under pressure, it's actively adapting. According to Apollo Research, U.S. companies earn over $1.1 trillion annually from Chinese consumers. That income is now at risk. Beijing is ramping up support for local brands, and it's working. Chinese stock exchange data shows that 85 to 90% of revenue now comes from domestic buyers, with the American share slipping into the single digits. To boost this trend further, China ran a $370 billion budget deficit in the first 4 months of 2025, a 50% increase from last year, funding stimulus efforts to increase domestic spending. Meanwhile, Chinese competitors are closing the gap fast. Luckin Coffee is taking market share from Starbucks. Xiaomi is undercutting Apple in smartphone sales. The shift away from American brands isn't being forced by law, it's happening naturally. Here's the key twist few saw coming. You can't import magnets from China anymore, but you can import motors that contain them, as long as they're built in China. This legal workaround changes the rules of the game. The Wall Street Journal reports that many U.S. automakers are now seriously weighing the cost of moving production lines to China just to take advantage of this loophole. Relocating a factory might cost millions, but a halted assembly line could cost billions. What was meant to isolate the West is instead pulling it even deeper into China's industrial orbit, and it gets tighter. Just last week, China launched a new national tracking system for rare earth materials. Producers must now report not only customer names but trading volumes, giving Beijing real-time visibility into global supply chains. This builds on earlier export rules from April and really shifts control away from just tariffs. Now, China can monitor and shut down shipments instantly, mapping and controlling its critical exports like never before. When the United States restricted China's access to advanced AI chips, Beijing hit back by cutting off exports of rare earths like terbium, dysprosium, and scandium. These are absolutely vital for electric vehicles, fighter jets, and high-tech devices. What began as, simple trade retaliation is now a full-blown industrial leverage war where each side is aiming directly at the other's weak spots. But one holds the minerals, the other still depends on them. Many believed tariffs would bring United States factories back home, that China would fold, that the trade imbalance would be corrected. But honestly, that's not what's happening. Instead of returning home, United States manufacturers are leasing new plants in China, and Chinese consumers are turning away from American brands. This isn't the reshoring Washington expected. It's actually a new phase of global supply chain realignment. And the next chapter won't be written in press conferences. It'll be decided inside electric vehicle motors, semiconductor fabs, and massive battery plants. Can the United States economy adapt fast enough to replace the components it once outsourced, or has it fallen too far behind to rebuild what it gave away? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you think the trade war is over, think again, because Beijing just locked another door.